Corinne Bellweather had spent 19 years keeping the books at Bellweather Freight and Logistics, a company her husband Marcus had built from 3 trucks into a fleet of 41. She knew every account number, every driver's route, every vendor contract by heart, and she had never once been late with a payroll run in nearly 2 decades. So when $87,000 disappeared from the company's operating account over the course of 4 months, nobody expected the accusation to fall on the one woman who had built the entire financial system from scratch. But it did. Within a week, drivers she had trained, accountants she had hired, and even members of her own family had already decided she was guilty, based on nothing but a rumor that started in the break room and a suspicion her husband's second wife was only too willing to encourage. If you've ever watched people you love choose convenience over truth and turn against you the moment things got difficult, stay with me until the end. This story is for you. Corinne had married Marcus Bellweather 22 years earlier, back when he was driving his own truck and doing his own books on a legal pad at the kitchen table. She was the one who suggested he buy a second truck, and then a third, and by the time Bellweather Freight and Logistics had grown into a company with its own dispatch office and a fleet yard outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, Corinne wasn't just his wife. She was the company's controller, the person who signed off on every invoice and every payroll check before it went out the door. 5 years earlier, Marcus had taken a second wife, Simone, following a family tradition that had been part of his father's household and his grandfather's before that. Corinne had accepted the arrangement, as many women in her extended family had before her, and Simone had joined the business as director of vendor relations, working directly with fuel suppliers and parts distributors. The two women had never been close, but for 5 years they had managed a working peace, dividing responsibilities and mostly staying out of each other's way. That peace ended in February, when the company's outside accountant, a careful man named Gordon Meacham, flagged a series of withdrawals from the operating account that didn't match any invoice on file. The withdrawals were small at first, $2,000 here, $3,000 there, spread out just enough that they hadn't triggered any automatic alerts. By the time Gordon brought the discrepancy to Marcus directly, the total had climbed to just under $87,000, withdrawn in 11 separate transactions across 17 weeks. Marcus called Corinne into his office on a Wednesday morning in late February. He didn't raise his voice, and he didn't accuse her outright, but the questions he asked made his suspicion clear enough. He wanted to know why the withdrawals had all been processed using a login credential registered to the accounting department, a department Corinne had run alone for the better part of a decade. He wanted to know why none of the transactions appeared on any reconciliation report she had personally signed. Corinne answered every question honestly. She told him she had no explanation for the withdrawals, that she reviewed every account weekly and had never noticed anything unusual, and that she wanted access to the login history for the accounting system so she could investigate herself. Marcus agreed to pull the login history, but 3 days later he told her the system's audit trail had been corrupted during a software update the previous month, a claim that struck Corinne as strange, since she had personally approved that update and remembered the IT vendor confirming a full backup had been completed beforehand. She raised this discrepancy with Marcus directly, and for the first time in their 22 years of marriage, she watched him look at her the way a stranger might, as though he were trying to decide whether he actually knew the person standing in front of him. Word spread through the company faster than Corinne could have anticipated. By Friday of that same week, drivers were talking about it in the break room. Dispatchers were exchanging glances when she walked past, and Barbara Whitlock, a longtime dispatcher who had worked alongside Corinne for over a decade, stopped inviting her to the Thursday lunch group without any explanation. Corinne later learned that Simone had been the one feeding details of the investigation to employees, always careful to frame herself as simply concerned, while making sure everyone understood that the missing money had disappeared under Corinne's watch and Corinne's watch alone. The following Monday, Marcus suspended Corinne from her position, pending what he called a full internal review. He offered to continue her salary during the suspension, an offer Corinne declined, telling him that if he genuinely believed she had stolen from the company they had built together, she wanted nothing from him until the truth came out. She went home that day and sat at the same kitchen table where she had once helped him plan the purchase of his second truck, and she began writing down everything she could remember about the 17 weeks in question, every trip she had taken, every day she had worked from the office, every moment that could be verified by someone other than herself. Corinne's daughter from her first marriage, a 26-year-old nurse named Whitney, drove up from Dallas the following weekend after hearing what had happened. Whitney had never fully trusted Simone, and she made no effort to hide her anger at how quickly the accusation had spread without a shred of proof. It was Whitney who suggested Corinne reach out to her older brother, Daniel Hargrove, who worked as an IT technician for a security systems company and might know how to access records that Marcus and his internal IT staff had claimed were unrecoverable. Daniel drove out from Oklahoma City 2 days later. After reviewing the company's network setup at Corinne's request, he explained that the Fleet Yard's building security system, separate from the company's financial software, had its own independent camera network installed at the entrance to the accounting office. That system, he told her, backed up footage to a cloud server for 90 days regardless of what happened to the internal financial audit trail. Corinne hadn't even considered the building's physical security cameras, since her attention had been entirely focused on the software side of the investigation. Daniel offered to help her request the footage directly from the security vendor, using her legal standing as a named account holder on the original service contract, a contract she herself had signed 6 years earlier when the cameras were installed. The request took 12 days to process. During that time, Corinne learned that Marcus's brother, Russell Bellweather, who managed the Fleet Yard, had begun quietly interviewing employees about her, asking pointed questions about her spending habits and whether anyone had noticed changes in her lifestyle. Russell had never liked Corinne particularly, and he made no secret of the fact that he found the accusation entirely believable, telling one of the dispatchers that money problems could make anyone desperate, regardless of how long they'd been part of the family. Corinne heard about these conversations secondhand, through Barbara, who had begun speaking to her again once the initial shock of the accusation wore off, and she'd had time to consider how unlikely it actually seemed. When the footage finally arrived, it covered 86 hours across 11 separate dates, each one corresponding to a flagged withdrawal. Corinne sat with Daniel and Whitney at the kitchen table and watched all of it in a single evening, pausing and rewinding whenever something caught her attention. On 9 of the 11 dates, the footage showed Simone entering the accounting office alone, always during the lunch hour when Corinne was reliably out of the building meeting with a fuel supplier or attending a scheduling call. Simone would sit at Corinne's desk, log into the accounting terminal, and remain there for anywhere between 11 and 23 minutes before leaving. What made the footage undeniable wasn't just Simone's presence at the terminal, though that alone would have raised serious questions. It was the 2 dates where the camera clearly captured her checking her phone against a note before typing in a login, the same login credential Marcus had told Corinne was registered exclusively to the accounting department. Corinne had never shared that password with anyone outside her own small team, which meant Simone had obtained it through some other means, whether by watching Corinne type it during a shared meeting or by asking one of the 2 junior accountants directly under a pretense that seemed reasonable at the time. Daniel cross-referenced the timestamps from the footage against the bank's own withdrawal logs, and every single flagged transaction lined up within minutes of Simone's presence at the terminal. There was no ambiguity left in the evidence, no room for an alternative explanation. Whitney wanted her mother to confront Marcus immediately, but Corinne, drawing on the same discipline that had made her an effective controller for nearly 2 decades, insisted on a different approach. She wanted the evidence documented properly and delivered through a channel that couldn't be dismissed as a family dispute, which meant going first to Gordon Meacham, the accountant who had originally flagged the discrepancy. Gordon reviewed the footage and the timestamp comparison over the course of an afternoon, cross-checking everything against his own records before he was willing to say anything definitive. When he finally spoke, he told Corinne plainly that the evidence was conclusive, and that he had a professional obligation to bring it to the company's board of advisors, a small group of 3 outside consultants Marcus had brought on 2 years earlier to help formalize the company's growing operations. Corinne agreed, on the condition that the board review everything independently before any conversation happened with Marcus directly, so that the findings couldn't be reframed or minimized before they reached him. The board's lead advisor, a retired logistics executive named Harold Pruitt, had worked with Corinne closely during the company's expansion 2 years earlier and had a great deal of respect for the system she had built. When he reviewed the footage, he didn't need much time to reach a conclusion. He told Gordon that in 30 years of corporate advisory work, he had rarely seen evidence this unambiguous, and he recommended the board present the findings to Marcus jointly, along with a formal written record, so that whatever happened next would be handled through proper channels rather than left to unravel as a private family matter. Marcus was called into a meeting with the board on a Thursday afternoon, without being told in advance what the meeting concerned. Gordon walked him through the footage, date by date, alongside the matching bank withdrawal logs. According to Harold, who described the meeting to Corinne afterward, Marcus sat in silence for the better part of 10 minutes after the presentation ended, staring at a printed timeline that laid out all 11 transactions next to timestamps of his second wife entering the accounting office. When he finally spoke, he asked only one question: how long the board believed this had been going on, and whether the $87,000 represented the full extent of it, or only what had been caught. Gordon told him honestly that a deeper forensic review would be necessary to know for certain, since the flagged withdrawals only covered the most recent 17 weeks, and Simone had worked in vendor relations for 5 years, with access to systems and accounts that had never been audited as closely as the operating account Corinne managed directly. Marcus authorized the review that same day, and within 3 weeks, a forensic accounting firm out of Dallas uncovered a pattern of smaller, less obvious discrepancies stretching back nearly 2 years, totaling an additional $41,000 taken through vendor overpayments that Simone had quietly redirected to accounts she controlled. The confrontation between Marcus and Simone happened privately, and Corinne was never given a full account of what was said. What she did learn, through Whitney and later through Barbara, was that Simone initially denied everything, then shifted to claiming she had only ever intended to borrow the money temporarily, and finally, when confronted with the full scope of the forensic findings, stopped offering any explanation at all. Marcus made the decision to handle the matter privately rather than involve law enforcement, a choice that frustrated Whitney considerably, though Corinne herself understood the complicated position her husband was in, given the family ties and the years the two women had spent building a life under the same roof, however uneasy that peace had often been. Simone repaid a portion of the money from her own personal accounts within 30 days, an amount that fell well short of the full total taken, and Marcus made up the remaining difference from company reserves rather than pursue the matter through the courts. Corinne never asked for the details of the financial settlement between Marcus and Simone. What she asked for instead, through Harold and the board, was a formal written correction to her own personnel file, along with reinstatement to her position as controller, back pay for the full period of her suspension, and a public acknowledgement to the company's staff that the original accusation against her had been entirely unfounded. Russell Bellweather never directly apologized, though he did stop making comments about her to other employees, and their relationship settled into a distant civility that neither of them bothered to force into anything warmer. Corinne found she didn't need his validation the way she once might have. 19 years of building the company's financial systems from nothing had given her a kind of confidence that no longer depended on whether every person around her chose to believe in her. Marcus and Simone's marriage did not survive the year. Corinne was told, secondhand and much later, that the arrangement Marcus had once described as a family tradition passed down through generations had quietly ended sometime that autumn, though the details were never something Corinne asked about directly, and Marcus never volunteered them. What changed more visibly was the way Marcus began treating Corinne's role at the company, deferring to her judgment on financial matters in a way he perhaps should have done all along, and never again allowing a suspicion to override 19 years of demonstrated trust without asking her directly first. Corinne returned to her office at Bellweather Freight and Logistics the following Monday morning, and the first thing she did was request a full independent audit of every account she managed, not because anyone had asked her to, but because she wanted a system in place that could never again be manipulated by someone else and mistakenly attributed to her. She trained 2 new junior accountants that year, both of them women in their 30s who reminded her a little of herself 20 years earlier, back when she was doing the company's books on a legal pad at her own kitchen table. Daniel, her son, eventually left his position at the security company and came to work for Bellweather Freight and Logistics directly, overseeing the fleet yard's technology systems and making sure that the kind of gap Simone had exploited could never happen again. Whitney visited more often after that spring, and the family dinners that had once felt strained under the weight of a divided household became something simpler, something closer to what Corinne remembered from the early years of her marriage, before the business had grown large enough to hold secrets inside it. Corinne kept the printed timeline Daniel had helped her build that first week, the same one that had proven where she was during those 17 weeks in question, folded inside the bottom drawer of her desk. She never showed it to anyone again after the board's investigation closed, but she kept it there anyway, not as a trophy and not as a grudge, but as a reminder that patience, documentation, and the willingness to seek out the truth methodically had done what no argument at that kitchen table ever could have. If Corinne's story reminded you of a time when the people around you chose the easy assumption over the harder truth, you're not alone in that experience, and you were never wrong for holding on until the facts caught up with you.